Hey, this is Matthew, and welcome back to Nerd News Today. Now, if you're a regular viewer on this channel, you know that we cover pro wrestling toys quite in depth and quite often here. And one of the ones I've been waiting for such a long time is what we have right now in front of us. That is the New Japan Pro Wrestling figures from Super7. When I first heard the announcement for these, I went banana, as Pat Patterson would say. I was so excited for these. I put my pre-order in right away on day one, and here we are today finally, and I've got them. And by the way, when was that pre-order? Well, I put my order in on November 1st, 2019. November 1st, 2019. Yeah, it's been a long wait. And that's not entirely Super7's fault either. I mean, they had a pandemic to deal with. Everybody's had a pandemic to deal with right now. That's caused all sorts of delays in toys, and of course, far more important things besides that. But at last, I finally have these toys. And well, I decided to do this kind of overview video because, well, I saw there was a lot of controversy about these toys very recently. So towards the end of last week, some photos went up from Ringside Collectibles that showed off the figures in hand. And yeah, they were really terrible photos. They looked awful, and a lot of people started getting really nervous about these toys. So luckily, the Major Wrestling Figure podcast, they actually did a live Twitch video where they unboxed these toys and kind of alleviated some of those fears. They talked very in-depth about those toys. You know, here we are today. I want to give you guys my own take on them and show you guys some more high-res footage of them, some more photos of them, and just spend a little more time discussing some things that I'm not going to do in the single reviews, because just to give you guys a heads up, as you can see, the toys here are already loose. And the reason for that is because I've already shot and recorded all my videos doing single figure reviews of each one of these guys. So basically today is day one of my 5-day New Japan Pro Wrestling figure review series. And this is going to be the overview of all 4 of these guys. And then starting tomorrow and to the end of the week, you'll see single figure reviews of each one of these guys pop up. So make sure you don't miss that. But first things first, why am I doing this overview of everybody? Well, I kind of want to give you guys a quick sneak peek of what we're looking at, and really to kind of alleviate some of your fears as well. And also kind of touch on some points that I think are also important that might not be good things too. There's some good, there's some bad, there's a little bit of ugly along the way here. So let's just dive in and talk about these guys. So first things first, packaging. And this is going to be one of those things I don't show in the other single figure videos. Here's how the packaging looks and how it stands up side by side with a few other companies. So when you get these toys, they come in a brown mailer box. That's what Super7 does. Everything they do comes in these brown mailer boxes. And it's just another way to ensure that your figure is going to arrive completely protected and completely safe in the packaging. And by the way, if you don't collect the Super7 toys, I recommend you do not throw away those mailer boxes. Those will actually help you if you ever want to resell these toys. They're pretty important for the value of these items, so don't get rid of them. They're handy to have. Don't just toss them in the garbage. So once they're out of the mailer box, you get to see the actual packaging, but there's then a lid on top of that packaging that has a metallic, shiny New Japan Pro Wrestling logo on the front of it, and that's identical to all the figures, and it looks really cool. It's a really nice little thing there, and again, just another way to protect your toy. But it doesn't really give you, of course, a good look inside the packaging, so once you do slide that lid off, you then get a really great view of what this toy is like, and again, it is identical to every other Super7 packaging ever. So if you've never owned anything from Super7, I know it's going to be a little bit foreign to you, but this is how they do their toys. So they all come in this kind of squat, short box. It's kind of shaped almost identical to. I've got a few Super7 toys myself, and they're basically the same kind of style. And it originates from them doing their Masters Universe figures, which are, again, a very great line. I don't really collect them anymore. I used to be really big on those back when Mattel was doing them. Then Super7 got them. They recycled the molds, all that stuff. That's a story for another day. But a great line of figures, and their packaging has basically been identical throughout everything they've done. So it's got a great big window display in the front. You get to see all the accessories, which is a lot of hands, an alternate head sculpt, entrance gear, and some other stuff, championship belt. You've got some ring ropes in the front as well. And then the back of the box, you've just got the New Japan logo, the Super7 logo, and statistics for each guy. So really very simple box, really identical across the board. The only difference is just the guy's name and photo on the back. And for size comparison too in this video, I wanted to show you guys how they look stacked up with some other figures. So right here, this is how it stands up to a Mattel Elite Edition figure. And you can see that the Elite Edition, I believe, is a little bit taller here, in fact, which is kind of a surprise. But again, it goes to show you that the box is a little bit squatter and a little bit more short. It's a little bit wider compared to pretty much most other figure that we look at. And here is a look at it next to an AEW figure from Jazzwares. It's the Kenny Omega figure from Jazzwares. And those boxes are also fairly similar in size to the Elite Edition figures from Mattel. And last but not least, here's how it looks next to a Storm Collectibles figure. I think this is probably the most important comparison to make because, I think, I don't really talk about this too much in other videos, but I kind of think that the box, it is short, it is squat for these Super7 figures, but I think it's a little too much. And I know they're not going to change it because that's their style of packaging, but when you compare it to Storm Collectibles, who's doing similar things, Storm got a little bit more compact, and I kind of wish that these figures were similar to that as well, because they do just look so different. They look more like a Super7 figure than they do any other pro wrestling figure. But that's only important to anybody who collects mint on card. That's just so you guys get an idea of it. But how do these figures stack up loose? So number one, they all come with alternate head sculpts, and they all look pretty good for the most part. I think every head is actually very good. Some are better than others. There's definitely some knockouts, and there's definitely a few that are not really misses, but there's some that leave some things to be desired. I felt that Okada and Tanahashi had very good heads, but I think that Will Ospreay and Ishii had the better heads. And in fact, I think Ishii might have the best head sculpt, but it's tough to say because Ospreay is also very good. I don't quite know what the difference is really between Okada and Tanahashi and why they just don't look as good to me. They're still good, but just like missing one or two things that would have made them as perfect as the other two heads. The entrance gear for everybody also is spectacular. I really like all of it. Again, I'm going to go more in depth on all of it when you see the full videos from each figure, but just to give you kind of a sneak peek, a little bit taste of it. They all have soft goods for the most part that are all really cool. And it's definitely a higher quality than what we've gotten from Mattel. And Mattel is going to be a big talk point in these videos, and even Jazzwares to a lesser degree, because that's obviously the first place to draw comparisons to. Because really, that's the big thing everybody wants to know about is, are these figures worth spending $45 on? And I'm going to get to that. That's going to be a major discussion at the end. But I will say in terms of the entrance gear, yeah, it's a big step up for the most part of what Mattel and Jazzwares have done. In fact, of those two brands, I think Jazzwares might be closer right now in terms of quality. Mattel is picking up their pace, though. They've done some really great work in the past 2 years. But really, the material on Okada's jacket, the material on Tanahashi's jacket as well, you can see, in fact, it's just different all across the board here. I don't have the t-shirt with me, but you'll see a photo of Ishii's thing right now. You can see what that looks like, too. But the material, the texture, the detail work is all just excellent, superior, top-notch to what we've seen from Mattel and even Jazzwares. And Jazzwares is definitely pushing things right now, but I don't know how long they can keep that pace up. So entrance gear is really out of this world, very excellent. And another really cool thing is that every single figure in this wave comes with a championship belt. So you'll see I'll spend a lot of time discussing each of those, and you'll see them more in depth in all the single figure reviews. But the biggest takeaway that you can learn about them right now is that, you can see here, they're not quite as shiny as what Mattel or Jazzwares has been doing. For me, that's kind of a problem. I want my belts to be very shiny. I want them to look like that back metallized look. They don't have that here. And even on top of that, it's not just the fact they're not that shiny. There's not as much detail as I was hoping here, too, in the medallions, and that was a big letdown. Like, I'm a big championship belt guy, so I want these belts to look out of this world, and they don't quite do that. Like, they're great to have in this scale, they're excellent looking, but, they're not what I wanted at the end of the day. So they're close, but they're still just a few steps shy of what I want, and hopefully there's going to be some belt customizers out there who make their own. I think that'll probably be the way to go. But, for what they are, they're good. I think really the main point to also watch out for is the fact that the straps on them is kind of iffy. I'm a little bit worried about those, in particular Tanahashi, because that is not white rubber. That is the black belt that you're seeing with everybody else, just spray painted white. That's not so good. I don't like that. It makes it kind of difficult to deal with the belt. So, belts are kind of an in-between area. They're good. They're not as great as they should be. In terms of the figures and the bodies too, for the most part, they almost all have a sort of like toned weathering effect on them. It's kind of some shading on them. More so with Ospreay and Okada. You don't get that as much with Tanahashi or Ishii, or at least it's not as noticeable, but there is some kind of like weathering effect on them. And that's kind of cool. Maybe not weathering. Weathering is more of a Warhammer 40K word, but there's some kind of shading, some kind of toning on them. That's a unique choice, and I respect that they went that route. Whether you like it or not, that's going to be up to you. Now here is the big thing I think everybody wants to know about. How is the articulation on these figures compared to Mattel, compared to Jazzwares, compared to everybody else out there? So I will say that articulation, it's again, these figures are in Super7's style, and they're not really known for having like the greatest articulation. They have good articulation, but it's not necessarily entirely comparable to what you're getting from Mattel or Jazzwares, or even Storm Collectibles. So what you're missing here is you're not getting double jointed elbows, you're not getting double jointed knees, there's no butterfly joint in the chest, and that's the joint that basically lets the guy go all the way like this as opposed to just doing that. So there's no butterfly joint in them, there is no thigh cut on any of these guys either, and there's no boot cut as well. So that's something that you get pretty much from all the wrestling toys. So you're missing a few kind of key points. Granted, this was at a time period when these guys came out when companies weren't doing that, and I think in fact Mattel had just announced their Ultimate Edition figures that they were going to have those double jointed elbows and knees. So it wasn't quite a thing that was super prominent just yet, but here we are now in 2021, and we've got the AEW figures, which have double jointed knees and elbows, and we've got coming soon Boss Fight Studios. They're going to have their figures, which have, again, amazing articulation too. And plus, we got the Ultimate Edition toys, as I just mentioned. So to kind of summarize what I'm saying here about the articulation, it's good on these guys, but it's not, I think, what we all want it to be, and I'm hoping that's something that Super7 will improve in the future, but I'm not optimistic about it either because they're using their style of body, and that's what they do. This is what they're looking at right here. So it's probably not going to get changed anytime soon. But really what everybody wants to talk about is the price point. These guys are expensive. These are not your typical figure. These guys are $45 a piece, and that's not counting shipping and handling and tax. So for me, it was closer to like $60 a figure. And when I ordered these guys, it was I think about $180 from Ringside Collectibles, and that was using a 10% off discount code. So the question is, are they worth 45 bucks a piece plus those other prices? So let's just kind of break it down. Now, if you were to find a typical Mattel or Jazzwares wrestling figure in store, Target or Walmart, you're looking at spending for like an elite figure somewhere around the $20, $25 range now. If you're going to order it from Ringside, you're looking at a guaranteed $25 price point and upwards of $30 plus shipping and handling and all the tax stuff too. Now, off the bat, it's kind of tough to compare Mattel and Jazzwares to Super7 because Super7 is a smaller company. But don't get me wrong here, Super7, you might be saying you're small, you're not that small. And I say that because you guys have enormous licenses here. So if you were such a tiny company, you wouldn't have as many licenses, you wouldn't be having Masters of the Universe, you wouldn't have all those reaction style figures that you guys are doing, Thundercats. There's big licenses here, so don't get me wrong, they're a small company and they rely on their pre-orders as opposed to being in stores, but they are starting to show up in stores now. If you guys go to Target, you can find some of those reaction Transformers figures. They're getting out there. You know, they're kind of like as small as NECA is, I want to call them, because, you know, NECA, they like to say they're also one of the small guys too, and they are. But NECA is now in Targets, they're in Walmarts. NECA is getting a lot more attention than they used to, so they've grown as a company, and I think Super7 is in that same boat. They're kind of the same scale as NECA is these days, so they're not that tiny. NECA is in stores, Super7, they're just kind of starting to dip their toes in that water, and I don't know how deep they're going to get into it. So they're relying on their pre-orders. That's partly why they're also 45 bucks. But again, I want to now spin that to another company I love, and these are toys that I've reviewed in the past, but not too much lately. That's Mythic Legions figures. That's by Four Horsemen Studios. They're based in New Jersey. When I think small toy companies and small action figures in particular, I think Mythic Legions, because these guys are based in New Jersey. They've only been to Toy Fair like once or twice exhibiting as Mythic Legions. If you go to New York Toy Fair, you'll tend to actually see those guys walking around because they do so much other work. But they're so small that they don't typically go to New York Toy Fair. And yeah, their toys, when they go to pre-order, you know, and they just had a pre-order in fact, they go for 35 bucks a piece. And they are also 6-inch figures. They come with different heads. They'll come with a lot of different accessories in terms of weapons, shields, all that kind of stuff. And I think also they're kind of like big things that all their joints pop out and they're interchangeable with each other. So that's kind of a unique thing to them. So again, they're a company that relies on pre-orders just like Super7, but their toys are $10 cheaper. And I think part of that too is because their packaging is way smaller. Their packaging is very compact, whereas Super7 packaging is enormous. But again, I can't really compare them too much because these figures in particular had a ton of accessories. Each one of them had 12 hands. They had belts, they had entrance gear, alternate heads. That's a lot of accessories. And also they had like a few other unique things here and there too, like Okada had money, Tanahashi had his guitar, etc. So 45 bucks is the standard price point for a Super7 toy. But, you know, it gets iffy too in that because I'm looking at like the Conan the Barbarian figures to just put on pre-order too. And those had like, you know, a recent Conan, it just had Conan's sword and an amulet and that was it. But 45 bucks is their price point. So when you consider what you're getting, when you look at who else is doing stuff in this kind of similar price point area, it's okay. It makes sense. It fits. I mean, even Boss Fight Studio, they're doing their Legends of Lucha Libre line. Those are 40 bucks a piece too. So, you know, it's a lot of money, but these are not for everybody. These are meant to be more adult collector items. They're more of a niche market to begin with. If you're a New Japan fan and a pro wrestling toy fan, that's the way to get them. So 45 bucks, as much as I want to hate on it, it's actually pretty good. You're getting a lot of value for that. You're getting a lot of hands. You're getting a lot of accessories. And it is a smaller company. So, you know, at the end of the day, 45 bucks hurts the wallet, but it's actually a respectable amount. And when you compare it especially to a guy like, let's say, Jushin Liger over here from Storm Collectibles, this was a $60 figure, and you got a lot less. He's an import. That's also why he was more money. But for 60 bucks, you didn't get, you know, nearly as much as you're getting with these guys here. So consider that, too, when you think about the price point. And I don't want to leave me in the ring just too long because, again, this is about Super7 figures. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on the price point. It's a lot, but you're getting what you pay for at the end of the day. I can guarantee that if you watch the videos of each one of these guys, you'll see why I believe that. You're getting what you pay for. They're a smaller run company. So, you know what? I'm going to say I'm actually okay with it. I flip-flopped on this for a while, but I think now that I've actually reviewed these figures and I've thought about them more and I've thought about other price points and other companies, 45 bucks I'm okay with. If they go beyond that, then I'm going to start having some trouble. And I think another thing that people have problems with too is the fact that you had to wait so long to get these toys. It was basically a year and a half before these finally came in hand. Having ordered from Super7 before and having ordered again also those Mythic Legions figures, I'm used to waiting a very long time for toys. So it didn't bother me as much as other people were bothered by it. The delays when we got to like 2021, that bugged me a little bit more. But I'm used to having to wait a very long time for action figures. So, you know, it didn't bother me that much. If you're not used to it, I can understand why it did. But to kind of summarize here, 45 bucks, pre-order, waiting a long time for them. I think it's worth the wait. I'm pretty overall happy with these toys. I think you're going to be too. So if you want to go ahead and watch my reviews before you decide to buy these for yourself, go ahead, because starting tomorrow, or depending on when you watch it, they'll already be online. Yeah, like I said, there's going to be single reviews of every single item you're seeing here today in front of you. And I'm going to have also comparisons to WWE figures, to Jazzwares figures, and a few other things along the way too. So that's essentially my hot take on the Super 7 New Japan Pro Wrestling figures. I hope you'll stick around to watch those reviews of each guys I just mentioned, because there's a lot to discuss here. I mean, obviously that's why I've got 5 videos in this week all about these guys. So yeah, really I hope you guys dive in, and I hope you give them a chance. That's really the one thing I'm going to say here is, you know, between the photos that were taken that were terrible photos by Ringside Collectibles, between the scary price point, between all the delays, there's a lot of negativity around these toys. But really give them a chance, come in there with a clean slate, and just look at them that way. I think you'll be just as impressed as I've been with them. They're not perfect, but they're very, very good figures, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for Super 7 and pro wrestling. So that's my hot take on them. I hope you'll stick around to watch more. I'm going to post links for every single one of these figure reviews as they come out, so make sure you're watching those if you're new to the channel here. And yeah, stick around. There's lots more pro wrestling coming soon. So New Japan Pro Wrestling all this week here on Nerd News Today. Thanks for watching. Stick around because there's plenty more to look at.